Chen Feng, a professor at the Fudan University in China, is considered the best anti-American fighter under the Xi Jinping regime and has 3.8 million followers on Weibo. He has always made a statement compatible with the Chinese Ministry of Propaganda. Until now, he said like this: Mao Zedong is a person I respect the most. It is possible that the C-19 came from the United States. In particular, Professor Chen made headlines last year claiming that Americans actually lead their lives very miserable compared to the Chinese. He justified with the claim that the US has no subways and driving a car costs a lot of gas. In August 2020, Professor Chen Feng also received attention in a lecture from the Tsinghua University. Earning a 2,000 yuan a month in Shanghai can be much more convenient than receiving $3,000 a month in Los Angeles. However, he made a huge mistake in doing so. On February 15, Chinese media began mocking the US after the massive power outage hit Texas. Professor Chen Feng, who believed that this was the good opportunity to criticize the United States, spoke in the interview about how vulnerable the United States is and how catastrophic Americans' life is. Professor Chen Feng wrote in Weibo, including a picture of a place of his house. He spoke about the actual situation in the US as he lives in Austin, the state capital of Texas. And he added that his house electricity was also shut down due to the failure of the wind energy. This is what he wrote in his Weibo. I'm in Austin, the state capital of Texas. On the 15th, a strong cold front and a heavy snowstorm of -10 degrees Celsius hit the country for the first time in the decades. Power outage occurred for 7 hours, and the cold weather even froze the wind generators. The vulnerability of renewable energy in the United States is a good example for the Chinese National Development and Reform Commission and local government to learn. Underdeveloped countries have better survival skills than advanced countries. We should not blindly follow unsustainable modernization and urbanization. However, Chinese internet users who had no idea that Professor Chen Feng lived in the US were shocked. But what was even more shocking was that of all places he lived in Texas, the most supportive of Trump and the most conservative in the United States. On February 19, US Radio Free Asia reported that Professor Chen Feng lived in a luxury house in Austin after finding his real address from a photo of his house on Weibo. Among other things, it was also revealed that he had moved there with his family for more than 30 years in the US since the 1980s. According to a local real estate website, Professor Chen Feng's Texas mansion, which was purchased in 2017 for $400,000 with 4 bedrooms and 2 toilets, is now nearly $500,000. In addition, last year Professor Chen Feng criticized the Chinese parents who sent their children to the United States, saying, I can't understand at all the Chinese parents send their children to dangerous American schools to study, which has gun possession problems. However, another revelation about him go even further, because as it turned out that Professor Chen Feng has got his PhD from the University of Texas at Austin in 1987, and his daughter even married an American after attending an American university. Since then, Professor Chen Feng has been criticized on the internet for his enormous duality. It's ironic that a man who is in the US says life in America is too tough after buying his house in America. That doesn't make any sense. I hope you get back home as soon as you suggested. You said 2,000 yuan in Shanghai is better than the $3,000 in LA. But I'm sure that Fudan University will pay you more than 2,000 yuan and that life here is better than in Texas. However, if you still don't want to come back to China, it means that you are a typical double-standard intellectual. As the criticism of him increased, Professor Chen Feng made an explanation by appearing on his video channel on the 20th. Lately, some people have been criticizing me and call me as anti-Americanism is work and going to US is life. But from the start, I did not oppose American scientists and American people. I just objected, saying that US defense companies and financial companies will ruin the United States and ultimately harm the world. I'm currently sharing experiences and lessons that I saw and heard in Texas, and that experience relates to the future of China's education, nursing, and medical sectors, as well as promoting rural areas of China. There are many fake anti-American experts in China, like Professor Changfeng, since Xi Jinping took the power. Sima, known as China's leading political commentator, is also known for fake anti-American experts. Sima continued to instigate Maoism strongly in China and insisted on anti-American and socialist values. However, it turns out that he quietly immigrated to the United States a few years ago. And there was a famous anecdote about Sima, who is called as a national traitor in China. A Chinese man who happened to meet Sima in the elevator asked him, "You insist on anti-Americanism, but why are you living in America now?" Then Sima made a famous saying, "Anti-Americanism is work, and going to the US is life." There is another celebrity who has come under criticism while making anti-America and anti-Western statements. It is Hu Xijin, the chief editor of the Global Times, who is famous in overseas. Recently, 8 months after the Battle of Gawan Valley with the Indian troops, the Chinese authorities published a list of victims and began to kick off massive patriotism. And Hu Xijin also joined in. Hu Xijin praised the Chinese soldier who shouted during this conflict between Chinese and Indian soldiers. At the time, Chinese soldiers said, "If you don't want to fight, get out of the way immediately." And Hu Xijin praised him with the words, "If you're a man, you should live and die like this man." In the context, the Chinese people showed their displeasure about Hu Xijin. Wang Chuiji, a famous Chinese critic, began to mock and criticize him. I strongly support Hu Xijin's remarks. If his son, who is studying abroad, goes to the war after graduating, I will donate my 3 months' salary. He indirectly criticized Hu Xijin for sending his son abroad, because Hu Xijin always tells the Chinese people we should be able to die for the nation. In fact, the Hong Kong Apple Daily reported last October that Hu Xijin secretly naturalized his son to Canada, and that he had an affair with 2 company employees who gave birth to children out of wedlock. Perhaps because Wang Chuiji criticized the sensitive part, Hu Xijin immediately started criticizing Wang. "Do you deserve to tell me like this? I'm a war correspondent and have been through 2 wars." However, Chinese people said Hu Xijin not to change the subject. "Don't try to change the subject. To Wang Chuiji talked about your son, not you. We believe you will send your son to a war." Some also said his career as a war correspondent was suspect. Maybe you hid in hotel near the battlefield and wrote an article in the room. At the time, Hu Xijin was poor, so he had no choice, but now he would never go to battlefield again. As Chinese celebrities and activists who continue to fight the US have shown duality, criticism in China is mounting. Therefore, the CCP and Xi Jinping's patriotic incitement to the Chinese people is not as much as support as before. Anti-America is work, and going to the US is life. What do you think of this sentence? Thanks for watching, comments, likes, and sharing. Be safe.